Welcome to the Shamrock channel, and welcome to subscribe. I was in a relationship with Archer for 8 years. I proposed to him many times but he never agreed. Because my family is better off than his, he was worried that people would think he was dependent on me. When I mentioned it too often, he got angry and felt that getting married would affect his face. He didn't want to be seen as a kept man. So I concentrated on being his fiancé, and took care of the housework and interpersonal relationships. Until I got pregnant and found his marriage certificate. He was very close to his friends. I realized that he had already found someone else. In the end, I chose to leave and end it all. It seems that not getting married has its advantages. Now the story officially begins. When I saw Archer Ford and Ivy Quinn's marriage certificate, I felt powerless and collapsed to the ground. Over the years, Archer and I have been proposed to many times, but he has always refused. He said he wanted to focus on his career, and didn't want to be looked down upon by my family's relatives. I have never expressed dissatisfaction. It turns out that he didn't want to marry me, he just already had someone else he loved. I packed my bags and went to the hospital alone. As soon as I sat down on the chair in front of the obstetrics and gynecology department, Archer called me. I almost forgot, he graduated from the best medical university in the city, and he has classmates everywhere. Lydia Hale, how could you make a decision about our child without consulting me? Have you even consulted me? I can't help but sneer. Archer, why do you care about my affairs when you're someone else's husband? You should be more concerned about Ivy. After all these years of marriage, it's sad that she's been left alone. With that, I hung up the phone. I went to the doctor's office to ask when my surgery would begin, but the doctor's response was a bit vague. It seems that he is Archer's classmate. I turned around to leave, but my parents blocked my way. My father came up to me and gave me a slap. What are you doing? No matter what, the child is innocent. If you hurt her, don't ever call me father again. Archer had long prepared for this, contacting my parents in advance to come to the hospital. I covered my face and shouted, Archer got married, not me. How could I let my child become an illegitimate child? My mother took me by the hand and persuaded me, daughter, Archer told us. He has his reasons, you can't blame him for this. My father blushed and frowned, why are you being so melodramatic? He has been home on time every night for years, and he hasn't cheated on you, don't make trouble for yourself. Their words completely destroyed the image of my parents in my heart. I looked at them in disbelief, and they were both on Archer's side. Just then, Archer arrived at the scene. Seeing my appearance, he let out a sigh of relief, walked up to me and took my hand saying, what the hell were you thinking? Why didn't you tell me you were pregnant? What if something happened to the baby? I felt a wave of nausea. Archer, I made it very clear on the phone that we were over. Lydia could never be a third party, and I would never tolerate cheating. How could you? I didn't expect Archer to frown at me. Don't you know that Ivy got depressed after breaking up with her ex-boyfriend and almost jumped off a building? I married her to stabilize her emotions. After all, nothing ever happened between us over the years, so I really don't understand why she's making a scene. I sneered. Who doesn't know that Archer loves her most? His childhood sweetheart. Every time she calls in the middle of the night, no matter what Archer is doing, he will rush over immediately. Once I thought she only regarded him as a brother, so I never had any objections and treated her sincerely. But this time she has set her sights on me. She is living quite a wonderful life now, traveling around, not at all like someone suffering from depression. I really misjudged the situation when I saw the two of them together. My father glared at me, his eyes wide, and asked if I had heard what Archer had said. Hurry up and stop this nonsense and go home, before you make a fool of yourself. I looked at my father and asked, am I your child or is Archer? He froze for a moment, then frowned and said, what nonsense are you talking about? Of course it's you, or else why would I be here arguing with you about this? I shook my head helplessly and looked at Archer. A smug look came over his face, as if to say, Mom and Dad support me, so of course you have to go back with me and stop causing trouble. I no longer resisted and nodded, but you have to get a divorce certificate with Ivy's father first. But Archer suddenly said, not yet, because Ivy's depression was still being treated and a divorce would make her feel even worse. I sneered and looked at my parents. You heard that. I'll go back when you get a divorce. I broke free from the group and turned to leave. I knew there was no way I could compromise, but for now I had to stabilize the situation before I could have a chance to leave for good. I found a hotel nearby, and waited for a few days before finally getting a call from Archer. He sounded exhausted and said, "Lydia, are you satisfied? I've already discussed divorce with Ivy, so stop causing trouble." At the same time, my father also sent me a message, asking me to hurry back and have a meal with the whole family to finalize the marriage, lest I look bad with a big belly. It seems that my parents already knew the news. I changed my clothes and went to the banquet calmly. The table was full of Archer's favorite dishes, and my parents and he were chatting happily, looking like a family. But as soon as I sat down, the atmosphere at the table suddenly became dull. I bitterly laughed to myself, thinking that my family of more than 20 years had been broken up by Archer's arrival, but I didn't show it. My father glanced at me and said coldly, "It's good to know you're back." At this, Archer intervened, "Come on, Dad, as long as Lydia's back." Then he turned to me and said, "Lydia, we'll live a good life together from now on, and I'll definitely take care of you and the kids." I looked coldly at his promise and thought, "Where's the divorce certificate? You haven't done what you promised, have you?" His face immediately turned cold. "Why do you always have to be a party pooper at the most critical moment?" I said I would do it, but Ivy is not in a good condition now. As soon as she heard that, she burst into tears. "Can't we wait? How can you be so heartless?" He only dared to act like this because my parents supported him. I want to stand up and leave. If the divorce procedures are not completed within 7 days, I will end this child thing. "Sit down," my father shouted. "Lydia, your mother and I have spoiled you too much, and that's why you've got such a character. From now on, you'll stay in the house and you won't come out until the baby is born." I was locked in my old bedroom. It was funny because it had been proof of my parents' love for me, but now it had become a prison. I was an only child, and my parents created a privileged environment for me, which once made me feel proud, but now it seems that it was just to enable me to marry well, and become the partner of some outstanding man. In the middle of the night, the door was knocked on. My mother came in and brought me a small dish of food. She said, "Daughter, you can't not eat, at least think about the baby." I took her hand and pleaded, "Mom, please let me go. I really don't want to be with Archer. He even secretly married someone else. He doesn't love me at all. Mom, please save me." I begged for a long time, but my mom just withdrew her hand. At that moment, my heart felt like it had been emptied. She said, "Daughter, you really misunderstood Archer. He really loves you. Listen to your mom, you can't go wrong." I nodded weakly. At that moment, she no longer seemed like my mother, but rather a tool of my father. She put down the dishes and left. My father took away my phone, but I certainly wasn't going to sit around and do nothing. This room was my old room, and I found an old phone in the corner. I had secretly bought it with my allowance when I was in high school, and I found the charger to charge it. Sure enough, the phone lit up. I took out the newly issued SIM card from my bag and inserted it. This phone card was originally something I planned to use to replace it, but I didn't think it would come in handy before something happened. Now it turns out that it actually came in handy. I held the phone in my hand, but I didn't know who to call. Over the years, my parents have strictly controlled my friendships, resulting in the fact that I don't have a single real friend. Of the few phone numbers I can remember, the only one is my boss, Vera Blake. I dialed the number, trying my luck. The voice on the other end was hoarse, as if the person had just woken up. "Boss, it's Lydia. I'm stuck here. What's going on?" I told her everything that had happened, and she immediately said she was coming over. Later that night, I heard her voice. I took out some bed sheets and clothes, tied them together and slid down. I wasn't scared, but rather felt lucky to have survived. I asked her to take me to the next city to have an abortion. As time went on, I grew more and more reluctant to give up the baby. I never expected that when I arrived at the hospital, the doctor would say, after looking at the results of my ultrasound, that I was not pregnant at all, and that the previous diagnosis had been a false pregnancy caused by hormones. At that moment, I didn't know whether to cry or laugh. I asked my boss to take me home, so that I could deal with this pair of not-so-nice people with all my might. When I got home, the house was brightly lit. Archer was pacing anxiously, while my parents were sitting on the sofa in anger. When they saw me come in, my father came up to me and gave me a slap. How dare you run away? What if you hurt the baby? Archer glared at me and said, Lydia, if anything happens to my child, I will never let you go. I smiled slightly and replied, this is all because you locked me up. I had a stomachache in the middle of the night, so I had no choice but to jump out of the window to protect my baby. Seeing that I looked well and didn't look like I had just been beaten up, my parents and Archer were also doubtful. Just then, Archer's phone rang and he answered it, his face instantly changing. Ivy had passed away. In the past, because of Archer, I regarded Ivy as a younger sister, but I never imagined that she was hiding such pain inside. Archer was very anxious and wanted to leave immediately. I, on the other hand, was lying on the ground, covering my stomach with my hands, my expression pained, feeling very uncomfortable. Archer, can you help me? I want to see what choice he will make. Unexpectedly, Archer ignored me and turned to my parents and said, Parents, take care of the child. I have something to do and I'll leave first. And left. I stood up, sneered, and avoided my mother's hand that tried to help me. It's okay, it doesn't hurt anymore. I looked at my father and said, Dad, don't worry, I've thought it through, I won't hit the baby, after all, he's innocent. After Archer settles this matter, I'll marry him. My thoughts pleased my father, and he nodded, without putting me back in my room. Early the next morning, I went to the hospital where Ivy had committed suicide. It must be Archer there. Many of the nurses at the hospital recognized me, so I easily found Ivy's room. When I pushed the door open, Archer was standing by Ivy's bed. Ivy looked up at Archer obediently, her face pale. Their hands were clasped tightly together. When he saw me come in, Archer subconsciously let go of my hand. Sure enough, a flash of jealousy crossed Ivy's eyes, but she quickly hid it. Why are you here? Archer looked at me discontentedly. I held up the soup in my hand and waved it around. I heard that Ivy's sister was hospitalized, so I came to visit. I placed the soup on the bedside table and sat down with a carefree air. Ivy looked at me and asked, Why is your sister here? I covered my stomach and smiled sweetly. I came to the hospital for a checkup. After all, the baby is already 3 months old. You're pregnant? She asked in surprise, her face full of disbelief. I nodded and replied, of course. I clearly saw the resentment in Ivy's eyes as she glared at my stomach. So I want to ask, when are you and Archer going to get married? After all, the bigger my belly gets, the harder it will be to plan a wedding. Archer frowned. Lydia, Ivy is weak right now, why did you tell her that? Ivy's face turned pale and tears flowed down her face. Sister, I know you have complaints against me, I didn't do it on purpose, I just lack security and want someone to rely on, so I asked my brother Archer to help. Don't blame him, blame me instead. Archer snorted and asked, why do you have to apologize to her? He said to Ivy, you haven't done anything wrong. I felt a little uncomfortable, it really felt a bit fake. Just then, the nurse came in to change Ivy's medicine. I have often delivered delicious food to Archer's colleagues over the years, so the nurse also knows me. Lydia, are you here to visit a patient too? Is this your sister with Dr. Archer? I shook my head. No, she is Archer's legal wife. The nurse looked a little surprised and gave us all a doubtful look. Archer's face was dark and he glared at me angrily. What are you talking about? I blinked innocently. Did I say something wrong? Didn't you get married to Ivy while we were dating? It's okay, I don't care. The nurse gave Ivy her medicine in silence, her face full of curiosity. Archer glared at me angrily. Weren't you here to give me soup? After I finished, I quickly left. I followed the nurse out and deliberately waited outside for a while. The little nurse went in to chat with the head nurse for a while, and when she saw that I hadn't left, she immediately pulled me in. Lydia, haven't you and Dr. Archer been together for 8 years? What's this Ivy all about? My purpose in coming here today is to make Archer's reputation at the hospital suffer. Ivy is my husband's childhood sweetheart. She has depression, and her only wish is to get married to my husband. Isn't that strange? How come Dr. Archer agreed to it? It's really puzzling. When I went to the ward to change Ivy's dressing, I noticed that there was something wrong between her and Dr. Archer. I smiled and said, don't guess, Archer treats Ivy like his own sister. The nurses immediately smiled knowingly. I turned around and left, thinking that after today, Archer's reputation at the hospital might be in trouble. When I got home, Archer called angrily, asking what I had said at the hospital. Why were they looking at me so strangely? I had only told the truth. You said it was the right thing to do. Why are you afraid of people finding out? Archer hung up angrily without saying anything else. He didn't show up for the next month, and didn't call either. He was probably busy dealing with the hospital's public opinion. But how could this not get out? Meanwhile, I was also thinking about my own situation. After what had happened, I couldn't stay at home or in this city with a clear conscience. And the headquarters happened to have an expatriate position, and Vera knew my situation and was helping me contact them. I was also busy on my end, signing up for a foreign language course and applying for a visa. My parents saw that I had become quiet during this period of time, and gradually returned to their previous attitude. However, the hurt in my heart was difficult to eliminate easily. During this period of time, I also occasionally went to the hospital to increase the heat of the Archer incident. After all, the story of the pregnant fiancé delivering food to his legal wife really sounds sensational. Perhaps unable to withstand the pressure of public opinion, Archer finally formally began discussing divorce with Ivy. I was outside the ward and happened to overhear the conversation between the two. Archer said, "Ivy, I got a marriage certificate with you before because you were seriously ill. Now that you've overcome your problems, let's get a divorce certificate. Your sister-in-law and I are getting married after all, because she'll be pregnant soon." Ivy said, "Archer, I'm really suffering. I don't want to leave you. Can you wait a few more days? After I'm discharged from the hospital, I'll leave of my own accord and won't bother you anymore." I leaned against the door and listened. I saw Archer sigh and say, "Fine, then I won't visit you during this period of time. After all, it's not a good influence." When Archer walked out, I pretended to have just arrived. "How is it? Is Ivy feeling better?" He looked very tired, obviously exhausted from dealing with the public opinion during this period of time. "It's all because you didn't take care of yourself. You should have rested at home during your pregnancy, not going around talking nonsense." Of course, he didn't know that I had done it on purpose. After watching Archer go back to the office, I went straight upstairs to see the hospital director. Archer was in a critical period for promotion recently. If all went well, he would become the youngest attending physician in the hospital, with a bright future. That was also the reason why he had taken the initiative to mention divorce to Ivy. I found the director and briefly explained the current public opinion. Obviously, the director still didn't know what had happened. After all, Archer had kept his situation very secret. I decided to tell him the truth. "Dean, you don't want a doctor with a reputation problem to represent our hospital, do you?" Seeing the dean in deep thought, I knew I had achieved my goal, so I quietly went downstairs to the company. When I arrived at Vera's office, she put a dispatch in front of me and happily told me that I could go to Europe next month. I couldn't believe it and quickly hugged Vera to thank her. She was the only one who understood my current predicament and genuinely helped me. A few days later, news came of an appointment at Archer Hospital. One of his rivals had been promoted. Common sense would dictate that, given Archer's popularity, someone would express dissatisfaction, but this time everyone knew about his troubles, so everyone was just laughing at him in their hearts. Archer came home in a rage. I watched him sneer. How dare he lose his temper with me? "You made the decision, you have to bear the consequences. What's the point of saying that? Did I force you to marry Ivy?" Archer slammed the door and stormed out, and didn't come back all night. I didn't care where he went. I was overjoyed that there were two happy events in just 1 week. The next morning Archer came back, and his face didn't look quite right. Seeing that I had softened my attitude, he said, "Wife, you're awake. I'll cook for you and the baby." If I wasn't working at the company, I would have thought he was trying to keep me. "No, I still have to go to the company. You eat by yourself." He didn't get angry, nodded, and even wanted to send me to the company. I had no choice but to agree. Along the way, he was very concerned about me and was especially gentle, which was a bit unusual. But not long after that, Ivy was discharged from the hospital and took the initiative to ask me out to dinner. She said, "Sister, I know you have misunderstandings about me, and I would like to invite you to dinner to explain properly. Is that okay?" Although I knew that this might not be a kind invitation, I decided to go anyway, to see what tricks she had up her sleeve. Ivy asked me to meet her at a restaurant in a scenic area, where I could enjoy the view while eating, she said. I didn't quite believe her, so I didn't dare go alone. So I decided to ask Archer to come with me. He is very obedient to me now, basically doing whatever I say. When I mentioned that I wanted to see Ivy, she reacted a little strangely, but she came anyway. Seeing Archer following behind me, Ivy's face showed a hint of jealousy, but she smiled and took my hand. Sister Lydia, you're here, and you brought Brother Archer. At the table, she glanced at Archer from time to time, her eyes betraying a hint of loss. Archer didn't dare look up at her, and just bowed his head to pick food for me. The situation was strange. At that moment, Archer said he needed to go to the bathroom, and Ivy immediately followed him. I followed them, and when I saw them enter a stall, I hid in the next stall. Archer was shocked to see Ivy come in, and asked her, "What are you doing in here? My wife will suspect something." Wife? Then why were you with me the other day? No wonder Archer has been acting so strangely these past few days, and being so nice to me. It turns out that it's because he feels guilty. But I no longer have any feelings for him, just disgust, so all I can think about is having fun. I secretly took out my phone and started recording, reaching into the toilet next door. Neither of them noticed me still going at it. Ivy, I already told you it was a misunderstanding. I can make it up to you, so can you let it go? No way, I want to be with you. There was a flurry of rustling bodies colliding, the mood electric. Archer seemed unable to resist her advances, his voice becoming husky. Ivy laughed. Admit it, you like me. She's just pregnant, and you're my husband anyway. Archer struggled, saying, no way, I've been with Lydia for 8 years. Ivy gave a cold smile and said, so what if it's been 20 years? You couldn't wait to marry me after just one kiss. Admit it, you like me more than her. Who knew that the next second, Archer would push Ivy away and say to me, it was my fault for having sex with you, but I really love Lydia, that's the truth, don't do it again. Hearing this, I quickly opened the door and walked out, afraid of running into them. I sat back down for a while, and soon after Archer and Ivy returned, Ivy gave me a fierce glare, which I pretended not to see. Archer was still very attentive, serving me food as if nothing had happened just now. After dinner, Archer went to pay the bill, and Ivy invited me to go for a walk by the lake. We were standing by the lake when she suddenly said to me, Archer and I are together. I pretended to be surprised and asked, what? I put my hand in my pocket and pressed the recorder, not expecting to use it at this moment. She continued, you know, you're really disappointing. Archer and I have known each other since we were kids, and everyone would think we were together, but in fact, he's been with you since college. I thought to myself, what does it matter? I just needed to seduce him a little and he would be mine. So what if you're pregnant with his child? I pretended to be surprised and unable to react. The next second she pushed me angrily and said sternly, now go. I fell into the water, and there was no one around. No wonder Ivy insisted on meeting at this remote restaurant. It turned out to have such a purpose. I pretended to struggle for a while, then sank. Ivy watched with cold eyes and didn't start shouting until I had sunk. Someone has fallen in. Unfortunately, she didn't know that I had been a second-level swimmer in high school, and my parents had invested a lot of energy in swimming in order to get me extra points in the college entrance exam. At this time, he unexpectedly used this skill. Archer rushed over and, hearing the sound of me falling, immediately wanted to come down and save me. But Ivy held him back and said, Archer brother, is Sister Lydia in danger? I'm so scared. You must save her. She let him save me, but Ivy held my hand tightly, as if she was worried that something would happen to me. In the end, Archer shook her hand off and jumped in. Archer searched around in the water for a while, but couldn't find me, so he called the police directly. In fact, I had already quietly gone ashore at a hidden place on the opposite bank. Although the recorder was flooded, as long as it was repaired, the evidence inside would still be there. I ran to a nearby house and borrowed a set of tools, then took a taxi back to the city. Ivy's actions really made me angry. She actually wanted to kill me. I will never let her get away with it. My fall into the water became the news, and the salvage team was busy all day, but they couldn't find me. Now, Ivy probably already thinks I'm dead, because she went to work the next day, happy and beaming. I watched from a distance outside their company building and sneered to myself. Ivy's company is located in the city center, and there are many large screens nearby. I paid to rent one and uploaded the video I recorded yesterday. Everyone in the business district saw the intimate images of Ivy and Archer. Ivy looked at the screen, her face full of disbelief. Who is it? Who did this? Take this down immediately. She was beside the screen, a little agitated. Obviously she was recognized as the heroine in the video. Who is it? Ivy's voice was very excited. I slowly walked up to the screen, and when she saw me she looked very surprised. Lydia? You're not dead? I smiled triumphantly and added, I should tell you. I'm a national second-level swimmer. You posted this video? I nodded with a smile, then told her that I had already reported to the police that she was suspected of murder, and should prepare to face the consequences of the law. Ivy's face turned pale and she looked panicked. She said that it was impossible, that I had no evidence. Unexpectedly, the next second, her voice spread throughout the shopping district, clearly stating that I was with Archer. She slumped to the ground, her eyes lost, probably realizing that her life was over. The police came and took Ivy away, and I followed them to make a statement. After a while, Archer arrived in a hurry and hugged me tightly when he saw me. Lydia, thank goodness you're okay. You don't know how desperate I was yesterday. Losing you made me realize how much I love you. I felt a little uncomfortable hearing this and couldn't help but push him away. You're so dirty, don't touch me. He stopped immediately, despair flashing in his eyes. Lydia, I understand that I have made a very big mistake, and I am very remorseful, but I still want to ask for your forgiveness. I really did something wrong before, and I really regret not cherishing you. Can you forgive me? Archer looked at me carefully, his eyes bloodshot. That was proof that he had stayed up all night by the lake last night. I sneered, saying more today will not change your current situation. I still feel uncomfortable. Archer's body swayed slightly. I really made a mistake. I hope you can forgive me. We already have a child, didn't you already plan to accept him? I swear I will be good to you for the rest of my life, okay? I really don't want to lose you. His voice became even lower. I really can't lose you. I touched my stomach. Sorry, there's no baby here. You're just imagining things. He froze. Was it because of what happened yesterday? He turned around sharply. Ivy, you made me lose the baby. Ivy didn't bother to respond. She was too frustrated to sit in the chair. I'm not pregnant at all, Archer. I raised my voice to bring him back from his state of madness. Lydia, I told him it's okay, we'll have kids later. He came forward to take my hand, but I pulled away. I no longer wanted a future. Every time you professed your love, it reminded me that you were Ivy's husband, not mine, and that made me even more annoyed. I let go of my pride and proposed to you countless times, but you always gave me a perfunctory response. But you didn't hesitate to take that certificate with Ivy. Maybe you really don't love me, but her. Archer had nothing to say, and could only look at me with pleading eyes. After I finished giving my statement, I turned around and left. Outside the police station, I met my parents who had rushed over. They hugged me and cried bitterly. I let them hold me, but I didn't feel anything inside. When they let go of me, I said that there was no hope for Archer and me anymore, and asked them not to push me anymore. Maybe my parents love me, but we can never go back. Outside the police station, I swayed a little and almost fell, but Vera, who had come to pick me up, held me up. Yesterday I was in the lake for a long time. The water was really cold, but it's not bad to be able to stand here now. After Vera dropped me off at the hospital, I had a fever and got an injection. When I woke up, Archer was asleep by the bed. As soon as I woke up, he woke up immediately and asked me, "Wife, are you awake? Are you feeling unwell?" I was a little surprised that some people could be so indifferent, as if nothing had happened. Do you know that your wife is now at the police station and may go to jail? You'd better go see her soon. Otherwise you won't have the chance to meet each other in the future. I said sarcastically. A hint of hurt appeared in his eyes. Don't say any more. You should rest and recover your health. That's the most important thing. I rolled my eyes and ignored him. After a while my parents came in with dinner, and I guess they asked Archer to join them. After all that had happened, my parents were a bit hesitant to speak, and were a bit cautious. After dinner, Archer was still standing by my bed. I frowned and asked him, "Aren't you leaving yet?" His eyes were a little hurt, and he said carefully, "If you need anything in the morning, just call me. I'll be waiting outside." To be honest, the more he did this, the funnier it was. Where was he before? And now he's acting so affectionate. I ignored him and rolled over to go back to sleep. The next morning, my mom brought the porridge to the table. Archer had spent the night in the iron chair. He's such a good boy. In a fit of anger, I slammed the bowl of porridge onto the floor, making a loud noise. Archer heard it and hurried in, asking me what was wrong. I looked at the bowl of porridge on the floor and thought to myself that I could get back together with Archer, but only if the bowl of porridge could be restored. Archer didn't expect me to say such a thing and was instantly silent. I didn't bother to say anything else and simply closed my eyes to rest. In the evening, Vera came to visit me and I sent everyone in the hospital room away. Vera asked me, "Your visa has been approved, right?" I replied, "Everything is ready, I can go next week." She looked at me and hesitantly asked, "Are you going to tell your parents?" I didn't think there was any need to tell Archer, but I was still considering whether to tell my parents about it. I shook my head and decided not to say anything for now. The next day I was discharged from the hospital, and Archer came to help me carry my things. I noticed that my parents were still trying to match us up. After all, in their eyes, Archer was the ideal boyfriend and son-in-law, and they would not give up so easily. So they would rather let me suffer. Thinking about this made me even more determined to leave. When I got home, I packed my things in silence, took them to Vera's house and bought a plane ticket. I didn't tell anyone about my departure. On a quiet afternoon, I pretended to go out, but actually got on a plane to my destination. When I arrived at the airport, Archer called. I answered and he said, "Good morning, are you busy right now? I'd like to take you to dinner tonight. I'm leaving for Europe soon, dispatch, and it might be a long time." When I finished, Archer was stunned. Did he really mean that? I used to hate you because you destroyed my family and hurt the parents I loved, but then I realized that they deserved it, so I stopped hating you. I wish you all the best. Goodbye. After I hung up, ignoring Archer's reaction, I got on the plane. I didn't call my parents until I arrived at the apartment arranged by the company. They were both angry, blaming me for not telling them. But it didn't matter, time would make them adjust. A month later, I returned from work to the apartment and saw Archer at the door, hurrying in. "Lydia, I made a mistake, thinking I'd never see you again. Can you come back to me? Ivy has already gone in, and I've already filed for divorce, so I have nothing more to do with her." He went on, but I didn't want to hear a word. "Archer, don't make me grow more and more disgusted with you." He stopped talking suddenly and looked at me with red eyes. I didn't turn around and went straight back to the apartment. Later, my parents and I kept in touch on a regular basis and maintained a tenuous relationship. After returning to China, Archer changed jobs and worked in a private hospital. I don't know who he will marry in the future, but it definitely won't be me. Once I wanted nothing more than to get a marriage certificate with Archer, but now it seems like the last thing I want.